Well, hey there guys, it is Flashback Friday here on Rock Hard Riffs. We have a very special Flashback Friday once again. It's all about the Beatles breakup on April 10th, 1970. Well, hey there guys, welcome to Rock Hard Riffs. This is the guitar channel for the self-taught. We have our special guest, Les Beans, here with us. And we're going to discuss the breakup of the Beatles. Les Beans here suggested that we should talk about some post-Beatles stuff as well as Beatles stuff as we have before. And I thought, yeah, that's a great idea, and we should start right with the Beatles breakup. Les Beans, you suggested that we talk about Beatles post stuff. Well, how about the Beatles breakup? I mean, what does that have any impact on you, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think so. I think the Beatles ending was definitely something that people weren't expecting, you know. I don't know, do you remember when that happened? Were you in school or?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I was in school, yep, I remember it. You know, the thing about the kids in the neighborhood kind of where I grew up, most of them were like 2, 3, 4 years older than I was. So it seemed to have more of an impact on them, I noticed. It's like, you know, I of course knew of the Beatles. I've been listening to them at that point since I was like 5 years old already. But it just seemed to impact people. It had a heavy impact, especially the kids that were older than me. It's like, wow, the Beatles broke up. No way, you know? Mm-hmm. And I'm like watching it and I'm like, wow, this is having a really heavy impact on people. This is kind of peculiar. But, you know, it was just it's like one of those things. It's like a water cooler kind of thing you could call it today, where everybody's talking about it. Did you hear the Beatles broke up? You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I don't think that the Beatles ending that year or ending in general was a bad thing though, because they have, it's pretty well, like, I guess, like bookshelved all their music. I don't think it would have really been anything new after that, because they had so many disagreements that it was almost like the perfect time for that to happen. Because after Sgt. Pepper, things between the members really weren't peaceful anymore, you know?
Really?
Yeah.
You've been doing a little studying?
I have, yes.
Wow, I'm impressed. Mm-hmm. Go on.
Yeah, and then after Brian Epstein's death, which was in '67, you know, they lost, like, basically their manager, but the person that could keep them all happy and make peace between each other whenever arguments broke out.
Right.
So that definitely...
I definitely agree with that Brian Epstein, or Epstein, however you want to pronounce it, his death was a big part of their breakup. Now, you got to think, too, his position was that he was, you know, their manager, but he was also their road manager at the same time. And that's what kept him working, was promoting them, like a manager should.
Right.
He's promoting them, which means doing live appearances and doing all that sort of thing. And when they decided to stop touring, which was right before Sgt. Pepper, they said that Brian felt kind of like he didn't belong or fit anymore. He didn't have anything to do. And they thought that maybe that kind of led to a little bit of depression in him. And that's maybe why he was drinking and taking pills, and either accident. It had to be an accident that he died. I just, you know, who knows? You know, who knows? He was gay. Not that that matters, but in those days, it wasn't so easy, especially in England, I guess. But I just, you know, who knows what goes on in somebody's mind? Yeah. But I personally just have that feeling that it was an accident, Brian Epstein's death. But you know, after that, yeah, things, you know, Paul kind of took over a bit with Sgt. Pepper to a certain degree, because it was his idea, and most of his music is on the album.
Yeah.
And the Beatles themselves, especially Ringo's come out and said it several times, that it was always Paul pushing them to work, to come out with the next album and the next song. And he would come to the next album, like to the White Album or Abbey Road or whatever, with a complete finished body of work. And the other guys are like, okay, what'll we write? And they're like, well, Paul's like, here, I've got a whole album. And they're like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
We're not your backing band, is what John Lennon kept saying. We're not here to back you up. this is a whole band effort, but Paul kind of...
Yeah. And by that time, all of them, most of them had different musical interests at that point. George had started going towards like an Indian style music
He'd
route.
been there for a while.
Yeah, and then John
more
was,
religious, I'd say.
Yeah.
More religious.
Yeah, and the music sounds that he was wanting to do,
like Hare Krishna. And
yeah,
stuff.
with the sitar. I mean,
and the lyrics. I'm saying though a lot.
Yeah, but it's not really like the Beatles sound. And and John was with Yoko, and there's he's doing a lot of
avant-garde stuff.
Yeah, so
punk. Actually, they were doing punk in the early '70s, screeching and making nasty noise.
Yeah.
It was kind of punkish.
Yeah, so I could definitely see how them having different musical tastes at that point, and trying to compete with Paul's kind of takeover would definitely lead to some tension.
Yeah.
But it also made really interesting music.
Yeah.
Once they all kind of did collaborate finally on their different styles that they were interested in at the time.
Collaborate?
Well, so like when the song "Within You, Without You" came out, that's a George song. Those instruments wouldn't have been there without George introducing them.
No.
So,
and I think that was primarily George and Ringo that made that, and they also George Martin, the producer.
Oh, okay.
And I think they had a tabla player come in, and I don't know if John and Paul played on "Within You, Without You." I don't know. They may have done some backing vocals or something, but I know they had Indian players and George, and of course George Martin producing it. But what you're saying is they were kind of maybe like diverting and stretching out and stuff. But see, that's the thing, though. I don't think that this is all just opinion. We're just having fun talking to you, right? But that never stopped the Beatles, though. That never stopped them before.
Yeah.
Why would it stop them now? Now, this is what I think what happened. This is, in my opinion, what stopped the Beatles. Okay, it's not Yoko. What it was, of course, is that Brian Epstein died. Okay, and George and John had already had enough of Beatlemania, right? Paul loved it. He's a showman. Ringo, he just went along with the flow, I think, kind of at the time, But they already were kind of, just not so happy with things, and of course that's why they stopped touring. Then Paul...
That was mainly because of George, too. George wanted to leave the band in '64, and
and John, too. They were like, they had it. Because you got to think about this, guys. People were bringing what they would call invalids to them at their concerts. People that have, like, thalidomide babies, as they called them. That they would take these people to the front of the stage hoping that the Beatles would cure them, right? And they said there are all kinds of people. This happened all the time, everywhere they went. And they said it's like, wow, this is just too much. And you can only imagine just that on top of the already existing insane Beatlemania, just regular fandom, right? But let's get back onto the topic. So, Brian Epstein's death, Paul taking over a bit. I think them going to India also had a good bit to do with it because they were expanding, like you were saying, and they're wanting to branch out and maybe leave the boys at home on occasion. And then in comes Yoko. Paul, again, is really pushing things, and I think John, to a certain degree, uses Yoko as a wedge between he and Paul, and kind of a way to distance himself from them, which led to the Beatles breakup. Now, it was Paul that came out publicly and said on April 10th, 1970, that he is quitting the Beatles. I quit the Beatles, he said. But John already said that he quit months before that.
Yeah,
he said, I want a divorce. He said at one of their group meetings.
Yeah.
He told it to them too. So they all understood that was pretty much it.
Yeah.
Then Paul comes out and says it publicly when they all agreed to not announce it publicly, or at least at that time. Mm-hmm. Why did Paul do that? Why did John do that?
Yeah, but they actually, the Beatles pretty much ended, though, in September of 1969. So, it took a couple months to take it for it to come out.
For Paul to say it. Now, why did Paul do that? And why did John do that? Why did John want a divorce, and why did Paul do that? I think John just wanted to quit the Beatles. He had enough, And he was finally growing up a little bit and just had to come out and say it. Look, I quit. Instead of using Yoko as a wedge, he is the one that brought her to the recordings and the rehearsals. Nobody else brought her. John brought her, and he kind of, I don't know, you know.
Yeah.
And so let's get to Paul real quick, and then you can say what you're doing. Then Paul is like, you know what? After all the crap that I have put up with John for all these years, you know what? Here's a big couple middle fingers to you, John. I quit the Beatles. I think Paul was saying to John by announcing it publicly first.
Yeah.
And he's like also saying to him, how can you quit the most successful band ever? And we have been brothers, writing brothers and Beatle brothers since we were 15, 16, 17 years old. How can you do this? You know, I think it pissed Paul off. And I understand. And I also understand John's point of view too. I mean, how much of that can you take?
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think of that?
I think it's pretty crappy that, you know, it led to that, definitely. I mean, after all those years together, even with the tension, just for it to break up in such a, like, leave such a bad taste in their mouths, it seems, is really unfortunate. But, and then everything that came after with the lawsuits and all of that, I mean, that's just really unfortunate that happened.
Well, that's, you know, they'll be the first ones to say this is what happens when you get a bunch of lawyers involved. The first thing they want to do is start suing, right? Instead of letting them resolve their issues man to man. No, we got to sue. And also, I don't think that the breakup was quite as bad as everybody thinks it was, because it wasn't long after they broke up that Ringo played with John on a few songs. George played with John on several songs.
Yeah,
Ringo played with Paul on several songs, etc. So I don't think it was quite as nasty, but yes, there were definitely the lawsuits. There were times that they couldn't be together because of the lawsuits and crap like that. But again, we have to keep things in perspective. You could say, yeah, that's really petty, and God, how can you do that? We've been friends for so long. But you got to look at the situation. These guys were the Beatles. The immense pressure that these guys were under, and they stayed Beatles for, you know, for a long time, for 8 years with Ringo, you know, and they still kept it together, and they still made great music. They never made any crap music, not one crap album. There wasn't one album that you could say, oh yeah, this is where you could tell they were starting to break up because the music's getting kind of, no. And if they remained Beatles to the very end.
And if you disagree with that, you're wrong. I'm sorry. Just like to say that.
Why?
There's no bad Beatles albums. Their music was spectacular all the way through.
Yeah.
Even if they did do covers in the beginning, they still did them so well.
What's wrong with that?
Yeah, I mean, that came out excellent. That's what made them big in the first place, was that stuff. So, yeah. But afterwards, I mean, Paul John and Ringo both played on All Things Must Pass, which was George Harrison's solo album.
His debut solo album. Triple album.
Yeah. You can hear John doing backup vocals in the album.
Yeah.
And, you know,
I think they were all kind of pissed off at Paul.
Yeah.
I think that's really what it comes down to. They're pissed off at Paul. But, you know, Paul, as Ringo said again and again, that he was a workaholic. And look what he did with Wings, too. You know, Paul McCartney and Wings. That was another monstrosity. Then he did so much more after Wings.
He's still coming out with music. He came out with a new album not too long ago, so it's just constant for him.
Yeah. And hey, I understand. If I had a gift like Paul, I wouldn't squander it either. I'd just keep on doing it. And that's what he loves to do, and it is like, that's just what he does. That is Paul McCartney. Great musician, great songwriter, one of the best of all time. So, well, Les Beans, we really appreciate you being here. We're talking about the post-Beatles on this post-Beatles weekend. So, well, we really appreciate you guys watching. Really appreciate you coming on over, Les Beans. And you all take care. Anything you want to say to the folks there?
Listen to old music, because it's the best.
Yeah. And if you were young when what he's saying is old music, that's still new music to you, isn't it?
Yes.
I can listen to Zeppelin like it was brand new again. All right, guys. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next video, next Flashback Friday.